Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with heart transplant survivor, 20 years sober former alcoholic, relationship author, relationship coach, and founder of the Monument Method Institute, Gaylen A. Wilson. His life has not been one comeback. It has been a series of forced reinventions. After farm failure, a collapsed stockbroker career, alcoholism, sobriety, career disruption after 9/11, rebuilding as a computer repairman, and later becoming a successful field service technician, Gaylen faced the largest crisis of his life. In 2014, a virus attacked his heart and left him in end-stage heart failure. For the next 3.5 years, he and Heather lived through hospital rooms, fear, financial pressure, uncertainty, lost intimacy, disability, and the reality that without a transplant, he was going to die. And then on June 19, 2018, Gaylen sat Heather down and told her he likely only had a few months left. About 30 minutes later, the transplant center called. The next morning, he received a new heart. We get into his whole inspiring and fascinating story. Enjoy this interview.
Well, man, I love your backstory. I love all of the pieces of your life that you've lived through. So thank you for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
You're quite welcome. I'm kind of on a mission here. I got such a deep need to pay that blessing of that heart transplant forward. And yeah. I think I've figured out why I got kept around, because this is going to save millions of marriages, I believe.
I love it. I absolutely love it. So let's hop into your world, and I want to begin with how did you get through that COVID time period? 6 years ago, it changed the world, changed a lot of the way that we operate. How did you get through that era, and how has it changed the way that you do things now?
Well, of course, Heather and I had developed such a good relationship over our, by that time we'd been together 18 years. And we basically never left the romance phase. We just started off with an amazing relationship to start with. And it just carried on even through the heart transplant, I had 3.5 years where I was slowly dying right in front of Heather's eyes. And during that time, that was probably the toughest time of our lives, because, it's during that time that a lot of couples will, the relationship crumbles, because either the sick person withdraws into themselves and pushes their caregiver away, or the caregiver just gets so exhausted that they say, I can't do this anymore, I'm out. And that never happened with us. Heather stuck right by me, never hinted that she wanted out. She was my angel. She took care of me and nursed me right up to the end. And I sat her down on June 19th of 2018 at 9 o'clock at night and told her, honey, I'm not going to be here in 2-3 months. We need to get ready. And we'd been to the mortuary once, but we had final decisions to make. And, of course, she was crying her eyes out because I had just told her that I was dying on her in a couple of months. Her soulmate was leaving. And a half an hour after I told her that, she was still crying when we got the heart call that there was a heart available.
Wow.
And so we grabbed our little to-go bag like a pregnant couple keeps, and off to Denver we went. It was a 200-mile drive to Denver. And there was a huge eastern Colorado rainstorm that night. The first 100 miles was in hail and rain. And so the waterworks were going outside the car, and the waterworks were going inside the car, because she had switched from crying because she was sad to crying because she was excited and scared, because there was a 5% chance that I could die on that table. So her emotions were on a roller coaster that night. And
wow, that's an amazing story.
Yeah, they had given us to 1:30 in the morning to get there, and we slid into that parking lot at 1:15. So we just barely made it. And by 4 o'clock, they wheeled me into the OR. And by 9 o'clock the next morning, I had a 38-year-old heart in my 61-year-old body. So I've just been so incredibly blessed. They've given me another 20 plus years with my soulmate, and And what we've discovered with the bondment method and the sanctuary bond has just made our relationship even more insanely close. The Bible says the two shall become one, and I think we're getting pretty close. So COVID wasn't really bad for us because we had been together 24/7, 365 since 2004 because I started the little computer repair business out of the house that year, and it took off, and then we switched to doing computer field service work where we were traveling all over the country, and so when you're with your wife 24/7, you've got to not just love her, you've got to also like her. She's got to be your best friend. And one thing that the traveling taught us was it taught us how to say I'm sorry really quickly and you're forgiven really quickly, because there's nothing quite as miserable as driving hundreds of miles with somebody that you're mad at every day.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm interested in the work that you're doing today. There's a lot of titles, a lot of things going on. So if I put you in front of a bunch of 12, 13-year-old kids at Career Day, and one of the kids wanted to know what you do for a living, how do you explain what you do for a living?
Well, I'm trying to change marriage culture. That's what I do for a living. One of the things I did with that pay it forward attitude that I got after the transplant was I got Heather and I into a course to become certified thriving relationship coaches. And I did that a lot because I had found a way to pay it forward by administrating the two largest Facebook groups for erectile dysfunction. Of course, I'm not probably going to mention that to 13-year-olds. But one of my big frustrations is when women would come to the group, and it was hundreds of women over the last 5 years that came to the group, and their husband had developed ED and refused to go to the doctor and do anything about it. And so the way he had dealt with it was to totally withdraw all of his affection, no touching, no kissing, no cuddling, no emotional support. He basically abandoned his wife right inside the marriage. And so all I could do was empathize with these women because I couldn't figure out how to help her get that man to come back to her. And because every time she tried to broach the subject with him, he would lash out in anger and shut her down with anger. And so I got Heather and I into the course to become certified thriving relationship coaches just to try to figure that man out. And the first book we read was by Dr. Sue Johnson called Hold Me Tight. And in it, she talks about her attachment theory. And her attachment theory is that we were bred through thousands of years of prehistoric evolution to have an instinct for a strong attachment to our mates. And that those people, the people that didn't have that instinct, didn't survive, and their offspring didn't survive. And so it got brought forth into modern man as an instinct. And so she went on to say that most of the fights that we get into are not about what we're fighting about, but about the fact that that attachment instinct has detected a threat to the attachment and has thrown the body into fight or flight mode. Just as if you were, starving to death or dying of thirst, the body goes in fight or flight mode to try to protect it. Well, the body feels that same way about the bond. And so once both parties get into fight or flight mode, the logical brain leaves the building because the primal brain's in control. I call it the lizard brains. So the lizard brains say things to each other that aren't meant and that are hard to take back and that do damage to each other's emotional system safety. And I always say there's no sexual desire without emotional system safety, especially for women. And so if a couple stays in that fight or flight often and doesn't do the repair work, doesn't do anything to come back to each other, they eventually start doing so much emotional system damage to each other that say 5 years down the road, they say they still love each other, but their nervous systems are so damaged that they can't desire each other, and so they end up with a dead bedroom. And so when Heather and I learned about the attachment instinct, I went to her and I said, okay, how do we stop triggering each other's attachment instinct? And so the first thing we thought about was, well, we need to watch what tone we talk to each other in. Because sometimes we talk to our loved ones like they're the worst person on the planet. And we think we get away with it because they love us, but really we're not getting away with it because we're triggering that instinct with that tone of voice. So Heather and I believe that our relationship is this big, beautiful marble monument, and that each kind word or loving gesture, or especially when you make love with presence, you're building on to that monument. But each cruel word or cold shoulder or fight you get into is like taking a hammer and chisel to your monument. So we decided we wanted to fiercely protect our monument. And that's the Monument Method Institute motto, is fiercely protect the monument. Because the monument has to be more important than your ego and more important than winning a fight. Because if you win that fight and damage the monument, you haven't won anything. And so we gave each other permission to start calling each other out when we were using tone that wasn't necessary. Honey, did you really need to say that way? And so that helped some. That brought us closer. But we were still getting into the fights and still getting in fight or flight mode. And so I got to thinking about it further. I said, where's the emergency brake on the fight or flight mode? How do we keep from getting into that altogether? And so what I came up with was, in a time of sanity, when we're both calm, we made an agreement and gave each other a sacred word. And ours is monument. And so whenever either one of us sees the other one heading towards the monument with the hammer and chisel, in other words, we've said something that's going to start a fight, the other one can call monument. And that does a couple of things. First of all, it reminds us that the monument is more important than the fight we're about to get into. And secondly, I called it a sacred vow because we made a sacred word because we made a sacred vow that no matter how mad we were, the fight stopped there. But then when you stop that fight and you're mad, you don't separate and go away and calm down and then come back together. But because if you do that, you haven't done anything to prevent yourself from going right back into fight or flight mode. And so what we discovered is whenever monument gets called, we stop, we turn towards each other, come together, embrace each other's arms, and gaze lovingly into each other's eyes and patch that little spot on the monument that we just chipped out. And so the science behind that is that when you gaze into your lover's eyes, it goes into that primal brain and says, your attachment's safe. You can stand down. And so the primal brain goes, okay, my attachment's safe. I can let the body out of fight or flight mode. And so once the body settles, the logical brain returns to the building, and you can logically discuss what it was you were getting ready to have a big fight about. And so that's what we call the monument method. And as you practice it, and it does take practice because we seem to be wired to fight. But as you practice it, the small fights just disappear, because as soon as one of you says something that would have started a fight, the other one's saying monument, and you're coming back together and preventing any damage at all to the monument. Pardon me. And then even the big fights, the ones you'd be mad at each other for a day and a half over, are over in 5 or 10 minutes with us, because one of us is saying, wait a minute, what are we doing to our monument? And we're stopping and coming back together and repairing the damage. And so as you do this regularly, as you practice it, your nervous systems start feeling safer and safer with each other. They start to heal. And it can eventually get to the point where your partner's your nervous system's safest place. And remember what I said, there's no sexual desire without nervous system safety. Well, now, if your partner's your nervous system's safest place, your desire for that partner can skyrocket.
Interesting. That's fascinating. So I'm curious. I want to go back to that 12, 13-year-old mold of your mind at career day. What did you want to be when you grew up? What was your dream job?
Oh, gosh. I was pretty rudderless when I can remember wanting to be a doctor at one point, but my parents weren't wealthy enough to send me to medical school. I just kind of I wandered through just putting one foot in front of the other. I wasn't living on purpose. That's what I tell young kids is the most important thing they can learn is to live on purpose, not just to live to deal with the next thing that's in front of you. For instance, I got married at 20 and had 4 kids by the time I was 26. And so
wow.
that was not living on purpose. That was just enjoying the ride. And
for sure.
And so I loved being a farmer. I started farming at about 23, and it lasted till I was about 32. But two of my last 3 years were crop failures, so that was the end of the farming. I ended up filing Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And so I have been fortunate in my life that just about every job I've ever had, I really enjoyed. I found ways to enjoy them, let's put it that way. And so, because I've had to reinvent myself like 6 times in my life.
Yeah.
I was on a podcast called Gamify Business Tavern, and it was kind of a role-playing game theme. And the host said, "Gaylen, you're like a real live role RPG player. You've had to have 6 character wipes in your life."
That's right. Yeah, that's wild. So I'm curious. You have this optimism. You have this ability of surviving and changing lives. Who has been that heroic force, that inspirational force in your life?
Okay, repeat the question one more time.
Who has been your hero? Who's been your inspiration that's allowed you to be able to pivot and to be so good about being optimistic and surviving?
Well, as far as the actual monument method goes, I'd have to say Sue Johnson is my hero there, because I did not. The only thing I've really come up on my own is the monument, the sacred word, because that seems to be the part that's missing in all relationship therapy models. Is they don't have an emergency brake on the fighting. And so they keep telling people that they've got to communicate better, and there's no communication that goes on in fight or flight mode. But really, I attribute the fact of me being able to pivot so many times in my life is from the fact that I always was grateful for what I still had, and didn't allow myself to become bitter over what I had lost.
Very well said. So what is that energy for you every day to wake up, to have this mission, to change lives, to love the life that you're living, and to be so passionate about relationships and helping other folks? What is that energy, that drive for you every day?
Well, I've kind of got the type A personality already. When I was 27 or 28, I had 4 kids. I was farming a dryland farm and an irrigated farm, had a roofing business, business sharpening implements for farmers, and taking 17 credit hours at our local community college. So I was a little insane. And
yeah.
And so that insanity kicked in behind the pay it forward need in me, And then also I got a lot of compassion during the 5 years that I helped thousands of people from all around the world, especially in third world countries and where they don't have good health care, or it's just plain taboo to even discuss erectile dysfunction. And so I never charged anybody a dime for any of that work over the 5 years. I was figuring it out. I donated about 5,000 hours of my time during those years.
Wow.
And so it gave me this passion to see couples healed, and especially because erectile dysfunction does such damage to a relationship. And then the fact that Heather and I have been able to get so extremely close, it just the driving need in me. I sat down last November to write one book on erectile dysfunction. And as I was uploading all my writings from over the last 5 years, because I would get to the point where the guy asked the same questions over and over, I would write a little essay and then put it in my Google Keep and just go copy it and paste it and drop it in, and so I could help more guys. And so I was uploading all of those, and I told him about the monument method. We didn't even have the name for it. It was just something Heather and I did that stopped our fighting altogether. And and he said, "Gaylen, do you know what you have?" And I said, "No." He said, "You've got something that doesn't exist in the relationship world today. It's going to become a worldwide movement." And so, boom, the mission was born with that sentence, because it's now become 34 books and a dating site. So
that's amazing. That's wonderful. So, when you look back on your life, let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into the 18-year-old version of you. You walk into a room and there's a film projector and you click play and a 60-second highlight reel of your life comes up. Does that young version of you believe your life turned out this way?
Probably not. I don't think anybody could have guessed, because my life is just a series of twists and turns, and it's like, for instance, after the farming, I got a job as a stockbroker, and they don't give farmers enough credit for how much business knowledge they have to have. And so I was doing really well with it. The New Yorkers seemed to love my laid-back Southeast Colorado attitude and accent. And so I walk into work one Monday morning in January of 1990, and I had been selling this little dental HMO to all of my customers, and including $3,000 of my mother's money in it. And they announced that company had filed Chapter 7. They had been lying on their financials. And so none of my clients wanted to talk to me. My mother barely still talked to me. And I can name that day as the day I crawled inside a vodka bottle for 10 years. And so 11 years later, I had gotten to the point where I was staying sober for 6 months and maybe having a weekend binge occasionally. And I'd kind of got my life back together, and I got a job as a traveling computer consultant for PeopleSoft, where they sent me out on projects. That was in January of 2001. Well, we know what happened in September is those planes flew into the building, and that consulting business went down in ashes with those buildings. And so there I was again, having to rebuild.
Wow. So when you look at that highlight reel of your life, what are you the proudest of? What are you the happiest about?
I think my relationship with Heather. That she has become my rock, my everything. I think what we all really want out of life is a relationship that is a refuge rather than another battlefield or something that needs to be managed. And with us, with the monument method and the sanctuary bond, which we haven't even got into, we have gotten to the point where our relationship is a relationship from all the crazy. And so, with all the political junk that's going on in the this day and age, it's crazy out there. But she's my insulation from it getting in and eating my soul away, as it were.
So I got to know, after this long ride that you've been on in life, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, everyone that knows you in different capacities, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think, I want my legacy to be Gaylen Wilson left this earth a better place than he found it. Yeah. And I honestly think I'm doing that right now.
I love it. Great answer. So if anybody wants to dig in further into the wonderful work you're doing, be a part of it, there's a myriad of things going on. Where's the best place for people to go, to reach out, any of the good business?
Okay, monumentmethodinstitute.com is my website. There's links to all the Amazon books. There's a link to my Monument Validated Person MVP dating site, because I've written 4 dating books teaching people how to build their relationship into a monument. And I wrote them in such a way that by the time they get through with them, they say, okay, this was great, but where do I find somebody to build a monument with? And so I made the MVP, and I'm making it free for life as part of my Pay It Forward mission, because I think it's so important for people that get the monument method and understand it to be able to find somebody else that agrees with that. And so I'm right now I'm building out my social media, but TikTok is probably my main one that I'm using, and it's at Monument Method on TikTok.
Okay.
And we're also just starting a coaching system on my website where people can get individual coaching sessions with Heather and I.
Beautiful. I will put all these links in the show notes. What an inspirational, wonderful story. Gaylen, thank you for taking a minute out today. Best of luck with everything you're doing. Keep changing the world. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. Our esteemed theme music was composed and produced by the great E.E. Pointer of Kansas City's River Cow Orchestra. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.